Friends, good morning, and welcome to this service celebrating the life of Hans Wagner. I'm Beth O'Malley. I'm the Dean of the Chapel at Hood and have been blessed to be colleague and friend of Hans. And on behalf of everybody who is gathered here in Gaithersburg and all of you who are gathered virtually from many parts of the world, I want to invite you to begin with me in a moment of prayer as we start our celebration today. Great creating, renewing, and sustaining Spirit, bless this gathering, the memories that will be shared of a man who is well loved and a life well lived. May the stories and the laughter and the heartbreak that we share here this morning connect us to Hans and to each other. If we were honoring Hans in a time before COVID, this room would be full to overflowing. But today, while the pandemic allows for only a few of us to gather here in person, we know that by the magic of the internet and love, Hans fans from Maryland to Australia, Switzerland, and more locations than we can count are here together in spirit, celebrating this good man, surrounding Sharon and Hans Sr., Claire, Heidi, and their families in love. From Hood College colleagues to Hans' student minions and all those he mentored, so many hearts are joined here this morning. We ask blessing, we ask peace for all that we will share here today. Amen. So any good celebration of a life is grounded in stories, not the words of any one person who's standing up here, but in the memories of all of you who loved Hans. And so I want to invite those of us who are here and those of us who are with us virtually, wherever you are, to listen to the words that are spoken today. Every life is a little bit like a quilt. There are these beautiful pieces that come together that are woven in a service like this one. And so I'd like you to listen with deep appreciation and love for all of who Hans was. And I want to ask Sharon if she'd start our memories this morning.
That was a bit of an introduction, but before I even introduce myself, I want to say to everyone who would have liked to be here today, but could not due to COVID restrictions, distance, any other reason, we feel you. We feel your love and support. We feel for you. Not being able to gather with loved ones during a time of loss makes a terrible situation that much more unbearable. It's like salt in the wound. I also want to let everyone watching the video stream today know that it was made possible almost entirely by Hans' sister Claire, with her help from her husband and her son. They worked like dogs to make this happen. I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she could work so tirelessly other than its love and devotion to her brother at a time when she's feeling raw like we all are. But I'm eternally grateful to her for that. And now I'll introduce myself. I'm Sharon, Hans's girlfriend. We referred to each other as boyfriend and girlfriend, not partner or significant other. And I'm not sure why, other than maybe it's cool to be a 60-year-old guy and say, I have a girlfriend. When he often surprised me by doing something thoughtful like brushing the snow off my car or scraping the windshield on a cold winter morning when I had to go to work, I would say, you're the best boyfriend ever. He gave me lots of opportunities to say that. I don't know, probably many of you don't know this, but we met on an dating website. Hans was fond of reminding me and telling others that I contacted him first. Why wouldn't I? According to his bio, he was well-read, well-traveled, smart, funny, good-looking, fun-loving, had great hair, gainfully employed, and he liked to cook. As I would come to learn, he was kind, caring, thoughtful, humble, helpful, supportive, motivated, devoted, attentive, and always positive. He proved to be the perfect traveling companion the minute we booked a trip. The research would start. Where to stay, where to eat, attractions in the area, activities to do while we're there, hours of operation, ticket prices, traveling to and from, bus schedules, rail schedules. He was really good at that, and that's just one example of the myriad things he was good at that I'm going to miss so much. But you all knew Hans, so you know his many attributes. His approach to everything, relationships, life, work, the checkout at the grocery store, any situation was to make it better. What could he do to improve it? Which brings me to the most important thing I'm going to say today. And I owe it to Hans to say this. He made me a better person. And I want everyone to know that. He loved me, warts and all. He would never try to change me. He would never want me to change. But he made me a better person by the example that he set. Just being in his company and observing his way of dealing with situations, solving problems, communicating, interacting with people, it was better than my way. And I began to adopt his methods. I'm still a work in progress when it comes to that positive attitude and outlook, especially right now. But I intend to honor Hans by continuing to try to be more like him and reminding myself on a daily basis to handle situations the way he would, because, like I said, his way was better. When I'm at a loss of how to act or react to a situation, I'll ask myself, what would Hans do, and proceed accordingly. And then I'll know I'm doing the right thing. That was all I was going to say today, until I read the posts on Facebook, Hood's Facebook page, and also since then on Hans's tribute wall. Of course, I knew what Hans did for a living, and we would discuss our days at work almost every night. He talked of daily challenges and triumphs, the hated autoclave that never behaved properly for him. I knew of his devotion to his students and his work, as well as his dedication to Hood. As an institution, he did not hesitate to get involved if he felt he could better a situation, not for himself, but for his students and the department and the college, for other people. What I did not know, in fact, what never occurred to me, is how he was perceived by his students and colleagues, past and present. Every person who posted a comment made it evident that he was appreciated and respected. He certainly deserved to be. And I hope that he had some idea of a fraction of the people who cared for him and what they felt. My feelings of sorrow and loss right now could not be more profound. But reading all of the comments that people posted made me feel so proud of and so happy for Hans. And I thank everyone for that.
Hello. I'm Heidi, Hans's little sister. I'd like to first start with my two children, Rachel Danis and Mike Danis, have a statement to make, so I will read it as best I can. This is from my son Michael, about his Uncle Hans. Despite living far away, my Uncle Hans has always been a very large part of my life. As our home up north was almost like his second home, his signature green Subaru Outback, of which I'm sure he put at least 500,000 miles on before finally getting a new one, was a mainstay in our driveway, with his long yellow kayak strapped on top. I have inherited so much from him. He was a lover of the outdoors, kayaking, skiing, hiking, and smacking my 7-year-old me on top of the head if I dropped a wrapper on the ground. We skied together, drank beers together, and we both shared the same great hair, truly great hair. My cousin Graham was not so lucky. We shared a love for books and animals. During my childhood phase where I was obsessed with birds, he would quiz me and gift me more books on ornithology. He loved music. I think if I could describe my Uncle Hans in the most succinct image, it would be him laid out on a couch, reading science fiction or a biography with Nora Jones playing softly in the background. I wish I could be there to say goodbye in person, but I find solace in knowing that he is surrounded by you all and that you all are able to be with each other during such trying times. He will truly be missed, and his loss will be felt by the many, many people who he has touched in his life. It's hard to believe such a big influence on my life will no longer be here, but the impact he has had on me in becoming the person I am will always remain until it is my time to see him again. The next tribute is from Rachel Danis, our daughter, about her Uncle Hans. Hans, I'm at a loss for words that you are no longer here. It's still fresh in my mind the many times a year I'd pull down my parents' driveway and there was your Subaru with the kayak on top. The day doesn't seem real to me, but I am filled with so many memories of you being around growing up. You encouraged my love for the outdoors and the environment. You were the one person in our family that I could have hours of conversation with about my environmental program, and the only one I could drag hiking. I also bought my first kayak because of you. We bonded over gardening and what veggies our gardens could sustain. You always had the advantage with me being in New York. I don't know if I ever said it, Hans, but you're a role model to me. I love to sit and listen to your stories of Switzerland and all the memories you had growing up with Mom and Claire. Our heritage excited me, and I grew my passion for travel and exploring to new places. I loved sharing my stories and pictures of Australia and Europe with you. I wanted you to be proud of the adult I became because you truly helped shape that person. At a young age, you encouraged me to look at the world differently. Even if I didn't quite understand it yet, my material things were never a priority to you. You took value in education, music, art, travel, gardening, and your 20-plus-year-old wool sweaters you always wore. You taught Michael and I what really matters in life. It wasn't about money or stuff, but it was about being grateful for family, friends, and the opportunity to enjoy life to its fullest. I laugh to myself because I know I always had quite the influence on you, too. If it were not for my last 15 years of a summer job, you were never been introduced to the Michigan, upstate chili dog. I know how much you enjoyed coming to visit me at the half-falling-down ground shack, and you and Sharon would come into life. You took her right along with you. The heartburn hot dog was worth every time to watch your niece run around like a crazy person serving 50 people at a time. I smile and cry as I can still hear you say, "Rachel, you are one of my favorite nieces. Don't tell anyone I said that." And I'd pause and say, "Hey, Hans, I'm your only niece." And you would just grin. I wish I could have told you how much I love you and how important you were to me, Hans. You knew everything about me, knew all my close friends, kept up to date on my latest adventures, and was always there for a big bear hug. You'll always be with me. I love you, Uncle Hans. As his youngest sister, I have stories to tell about Hans that could go on for a long time. So I'll narrow down just a few that were precious to me. And Hans and I had a unique bond of basically being pranksters and tricksters most of our lives. So now, sweet Hans, your little sister must say goodbye. Hans is a kind and caring person, and anyone who knew him would certainly agree. Hans was gentle, kind and caring, and always the voice of reason. He was calm when most of us were freaking out. He had a unique and clear vision of the world and the people in it, and offered a quiet analysis of the situation. He often reminded me, "Don't forget I gave you gas masks for Christmas, and when the zombies come, we're headed to your house." His intelligence wouldn't allow silly outbursts or anger. I envied how he had that skill of reasoning and quietness. Hans's humor is one that we all can relate to. It was unique, quiet, and a little sneaky, but cute. He had a unique way of cracking a joke, followed by his grin and a smirk. We had that bond together, and I would have to admit that we got that little quirk from my dear mother, Doreen, who we call Mummy. She was quite the trickster. She taught us quite a few little things to do to one another. One of my favorite memories is how we tried to beat one another out and get to each other as a prank first. And my mother had just finished the novel Thornbirds, a raging novel of the time back in the probably 70s and 80s. And it was my turn to read the book. I devoured it. And then soon on TV, there was the Thornbirds series. Hans hadn't read the novel, and he had mentioned he couldn't wait to watch it on TV. I knew every moment of that novel. And as I watched the TV scene of a moment that was going to happen, I ran into the kitchen, dialed Hans's phone number to his apartment, and when he picked up, I yelled, "He drowns," and slammed the phone down. Yep, that's how I got him, and then he vowed revenge that he would get me back. Almost 40 years later, my husband and I, Jay, sat in a dark movie theater watching the newest James Bond movie. In the pitch dark, I could see the glow of my cell phone go off. And as a good mother, because you've got children, I looked at my phone. And there was my brother Hans in big capital letters. Q dies. He got me good. That is Hans. He was a prankster. He even did it again before I even turned 50. He found a way to get to my school, my high school, where embarrassing Mrs. Danis was probably top on his list. He convinced the office schoolgirls to put in the announcement 6 months ahead of time to remind Mrs. Danis every day that she was turning 50. They even put it in the faculty sign-in book. I expected a gorilla with balloons. I got announcements echoing down the hallway. That was my brother, and he won first prize. Claire, Hans, and I grew up in Bridgewater, New Jersey, with the two best parents anybody could ask for, Mummy and Daddy. That's what we called them, Mummy and Daddy. And the utmost gratitude that they bestowed upon their families, and we bestowed back to them with respect and love. They were the best. Hans was a great big brother. And when we were little, I remember Claire and I would play this crazy game of Hans was the rock. He would curl up in a little ball in the living room. We would throw a blanket over him, and Claire and I would pretend the living room was a forest or a jungle and sit on the rock. I know, sit on the rock, knowing full well that the game was Hans was to leap up and grab one of us, whoever wasn't fortunate enough to get out of the room. Yes, he was the rock under the blanket. He is most definitely a rock in many more ways than that. My mother often would hear us yelling and screaming in the living room, playing this game, and she sometimes would get annoyed, and we would hear the kitchen drawer open up where the famous wooden spoon lay waiting for us. When we would hear the rollers of the kitchen drawer, on the many times we would yell and scream, we would run like hell. And the game was who got out of the room first so they didn't get whacked by the wooden spoon. Hans, unfortunately, was one day the last one out of the room, and I heard a crack and then utter laughing as my mother and my brother stood there laughing because she had broken the wooden spoon. The humor ran deep through our family of the fun that we had doing simple things like that. Hans then worked at Steck's Delicatessen as a young man, washing dishes, and then soon became the owner of Steck's. When he came home from work after a long day, he would jump on the couch and sit next to me. And here is where many of Hans's nicknames were created. He would jump on the couch, and I would look at him and go, "Ew, you smell. You stinky. You smell like a salami." And he goes, "No, I did potatoes today." "Okay, you smell like salami and potatoes." So I said, "You're stinky." And so came the name Stinky, or Hansi Poo, or Hansi Stinky, all the names that we've had since he was probably 17. And that's one of my favorite stories of the nicknames that we created for Hans of all our years together. Hans would come up to the Adirondacks where we lived in upstate New York and visit Rachel, Michael, and my husband, and became found friends with many of the area people and friends that we had. He was an avid kayaker, hiker, and would love to come visit us. And most of the time I would say to him on the phone, "Hey buddy, when are you coming up next?" He always found the time to come up and just hang out with us. When he did arrive, Hans was quick to go to my refrigerator. He would open the refrigerator and say, "Holy cow, I could live here for 3 months." And I said, "Knock yourself out." He was a master of making anything decent out of leftovers that we didn't want to eat. Hans was the leftover creator of just an expertise meal. He would look through my pantry and say, "Why do you have 5 cans of black beans?" "I don't know, because if I run up, I've got backup." He loved my backup. "I could stay here forever," he said, and he was always welcome. Jay's family, the Danis family, grew to know Hans as well as a gentle, kind individual, very accepting of everyone, and always fit in, loved parties, loved get-togethers, and he knew them well, and they cherished him as well. I loved the time that he had with us and had no idea that we would be without him, and my memories of him lounging down near the rock beach with crackers and cheese and some wine, his kayak, and Sharon by his side will always be with me. Or watching Hans take a nap on our couch with some music playing with a pile of stereophile magazines, because he and Jay loved music and would always hang out in the living room and play music together. The emptiness and absence of Hans is deep and will be forever. I do also want to reach out and thank Hood College and the students and staff and faculty for their Facebook page. It was an incredible window of part of his life that was really very nice to see. We all know where we all work, but to actually read the tributes to Hans, he would have loved that. He would have loved that. I also want to make mention that my father, Hans Johann Wagner, had the pleasure of seeing Hans the last weekend of February, and left my father's home in North Carolina on Sunday, February 28th. Only did we know that 3 days later, he would be gone. But I'm so thankful that my father got to see him, because he went down to see my father all the time and help him. It didn't matter what it was, he was there. 6, 7, 8-hour ride down. He was there for my father at every step of the way. That's just who he was. He was just a great, nice person. I love you, Hansi. I love you, Stinky. I love you, Hansi Poo. I love you, Buddy. And I will miss you forever. Now I'm going to turn over the mic to my husband, Jay, who has a few words to say as well.
Hi, I'm Jay, Hans's brother-in-law. And when I found out last week what had happened, I had to make plans and arrangements to come down here and just inform certain people what had happened. And I found myself saying, my brother-in-law Hans passed away. And it didn't seem right. It didn't feel right, not least because it shouldn't have happened for at least another 30 years, but also by calling him my brother-in-law, I felt like I diminished the way I felt for him, the love I had for him. I have 2 brothers in birth, and I love them both dearly, but I didn't love Hans any less than them. He was not just my brother-in-law. He was not just my brother. He was one of my best friends. We had a lot of things in common. We both loved music. We both loved good food and wine. We both loved Heidi, his sister, my wife. We had so much in common. Sometimes I wouldn't see him for the better part of a year, but when he would show up, it was like we hadn't been apart for a minute. He would come up to the lake, and we would go boating. He would go kayaking. He would come up in the winter, and we would snowmobile together and ski together. I don't know what it'll be like without him. I can't imagine the next 10, 20, 30 years without him being a part of our life in the way that he always has been. One of the things I loved about him most was whenever I would get into an argument with Heidi about how big the speakers should be in the listening room or what car I should buy, Hans was the only one that always took my side. Brave man. I don't know that he always really agreed with me. Sometimes I think he just did it to tweak Heidi, but I loved him for it anyway. When my children were young and I and Heidi would be at our wits' end, Hans would step in and bring them outside and talk to them about something. He would have been a great father. When Hans met Sharon, we saw him a little less, and that made me sad. But when we saw him, he was much happier. Don't get me wrong, Hans was always happy. Hans was never sad. Hans was always level and positive. Both Heidi and I could learn a lot from that. We're a little bit more erratic. But when Hans was with Sharon, to kind of quote a cheesy movie, I think she completed him. He was a different man, a better man, and he was already a great man. So that made us much happier. And we got Sharon as a bonus. For those of you on the interwebs who don't know me, I can be kind of a prickly person. If I know you and I like you, fine. If not, good luck. The reason I bring that up is because Hans was not like that. Hans did not have a bad bone in his body. The man was just good. When I told my older brother, Mark, that he passed, the one thing I said was, he is the nicest person I ever knew. And I really thought about it, and he really was. He just was always there to help. And it was always in the little things. He was the kind of guy that would take their shirt off his back for somebody he didn't even know. But again, it was the little things. I learned a lot from him. I'm not a good cook, but I do like to eat. Heidi is a great cook. Hans is a great cook. When he would come and they would prepare dinner, before I even took my last bite, he was up cleaning plates and things. When Heidi would come home late or I would be at work, because he would stay at our house a lot of times when we didn't have vacation because he was part of the family. He would have dinner ready for us when we'd come home. He was so thoughtful, and again, the little things. We used to have a lot of family gatherings because we live on the lake, and he got to know my side of the family very well. Like I said, he was a part of the family, and obviously, and when his family would come up, and we'd have big gatherings, and Hans would be the first one to pitch in and help out. One day I went to work, and Heidi went to work, and I came back, and he had built a rock wall on the front of the lake. Who does that? Who builds a rock wall at your house when you're gone to work? When we would have the family gatherings, the worst job in the world was, we have 2 big labs, and the worst job was somebody had to go out and pick up the poop in the yard, and I'd be yelling at the children to do it, and before I finished yelling, there's Hans out in the back with a shovel. That's the kind of guy he was. I want to emulate him more in my life going forward. I want to take more time to be with my family and to remember the way he was. For a living, I work on the road. I'm a salesman, and I travel a lot. I travel all the time. I used to be gone, 3 and 4 nights a week. Now with COVID, a little bit less. But I would always, when I saw something, it would remind me of a person, and I'd want to give them a gift. I'd buy it for him then and not worry about Christmas or a birthday. With Hans, I would give it to him whenever he came up. My children could tell you that it's not uncommon for weeks after Christmas, I'm finding presents that I hid in my bedroom or under the bed or in the office. The last 2 things that I bought for Hans was the new Norah Jones album and a T-shirt. Whenever I would see a T-shirt, usually a hiking T-shirt, that would remind me of Hans, I would get it for him. So this is the most recent one that I got, and I would call this a Hansi shirt, and it says, hike more, worry less. So Hans, you got all the time in the world now to hike more and worry less, and I hope that you do that until all of us here join you. I love you. I miss you. Thank you so much for what you've given us. I think, Ed, you're next. Next is my brother, Ed, who's also my brother-in-law.
Good morning. I'm Ed, Hans's brother-in-law. Oh, this is difficult. I just right now I'd like to take time to thank everybody who texted, called, emailed, went on the web pages and everything else. It's just wonderful to see that. Hans was just a wonderful person, and we love him so much. And many thanks to you all. I just realized I can't see, and I may steam up my glasses. I'm sorry. Yes, we loved Hans. And I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. The greatness of Hans, his humor, his quiet and prudent and thoughtful demeanor, his probity, and his decency. They just his persona. It's just was framed in an honorable goodness, encased in a deep, dependable character. That's always Hans. And he was a great natural leader and a man of action. And as you heard from Heidi and Jay and everyone sharing, he could talk the talk, but he'd prefer usually to walk the walk and just quietly and industriously fix a problem or do something. And it's not just dishes, fix a car, fix a kayak, no grumbling, just go right at it and do it. I think you all agree that all these fine qualities, they were just wrapped in a very down-to-earth person. And having been a part of the Wagner family for more than 40 years, been lucky enough to do that, I could see that these character traits formed from his wonderful parents and family. Yep, that's Hans, and we love him. Just like everybody else, there's tons of stories, but in my 40 years of knowing Hans, with all the stories and the trips and the fun, I'll relate one fun story. When Claire and I started dating, I met Hans early on, and we became friends immediately. It just clicked. I remember that early in the relationship, Hans came to my home in Montclair to pick up Claire, and there he met my mother, Louise. Mom basically was absolutely delighted that Claire and I were dating, and she thought Claire was wonderful. Hans arrived at the house, and we all sat in the kitchen visiting. And when Mom asked Hans what he'd like to drink, he asked for tea. His stock rose 20 points right there. And Mom, who was an excellent judge of character and just did not suffer fools gladly, just had a wonderful discussion with Hans. And after they left, Mom said she was just so impressed with Hans, and that was huge for everyone. Because if maybe Hans is a crappy brother, it might have caused Claire and I to have a problem. It certainly didn't. Later, my sisters, Sarah and Julie, also, excuse me a moment, also loved and basically adopted Claire as a sister. After they met Hans, they adopted Hans as well as a third brother. And after meeting and visiting, everybody got together, got along so well as a family. Following everyone's migration to Maryland, Julie and Sarah would often have parties at their homes in Rockville. And Hans, and then Hans and beloved Sharon, were always on the party roster. They always just were added into the mix, and always just a wonderful family thing. Whenever Hans would arrive at our house, his typical phrase of greeting was, "Hi, Edward." And I would say, "Hi, Hans. Would you like an ale or an IPA?" Just not missing a beat. And we would just sit and talk. There was usually no TV running or anything. We'd just sit and chat and talk about everything. I subsequently learned from Claire kind of early on that Hans was also proudly an Eagle Scout, as am I. In thinking of his great character traits, Hans the Eagle made sense. In scouting, only 4% of the scouts who start the scouting trail end up as an eagle. Once an eagle, always an eagle is the phrase. And I can tell you, and it's been amplified by everyone in this room, that Hans lived the scout law. And for those who are unfamiliar with it, the first 4 words of the law begin, trustworthy, loyal, helpful, and friendly. Anybody would agree that's Hans. Sorry. He was also a wonderful and thoughtful and wonderful mind, but a wonderful counsel. He had great erudition and much practical experience. And from the earliest time in our relationship, whenever a problem or a difficult question arose, Claire would ask me, "Did you ask Hans?" Or, "Hans and I discussed this, and this is his opinion." That happened a lot. That Hans later became a teacher at Hood College was not surprising. He had a great love of learning and wonderful mentoring skills. I did not discover how great an impact Hans had at Hood until we recently met with some of Hans's wonderful coworkers who described what a great mentor and inspiration Hans was to his students and coworkers, and what a positive impact he had at Hood. When we cleared out his office, we found many students heartfelt thank yous and cards and notes which attested to his genuine dedication to the community and his constant support to his students and coworkers. Today, or these past days, when we looked at the Hood College Facebook page, this just outpouring of grief and support amplifies the huge order of magnitude of Hans's impact, and just how wonderful it is to serve and have such a great community of friends. We just loved Hans. Okay, sorry. In closing, there's one other Boy Scout tradition that applies here to Hans. In training younger scouts, for reading trails and signs on trails, the older scouts will hike ahead and leave natural symbols on the trails, stacks of rocks and arrows and tree branches stacked right ways. And these tell the scouts as they go what's ahead on the trail. One important symbol applied to Hans, who went ahead on his last trail. A circle is scratched in the dirt path with a dot or a rock in the middle. That symbolizes going home, meaning the trail has ended. Sorry. The trail has ended for that scout, and he has returned home. Hans has finally gone home. And may God bless him and keep him. And I am so fortunate to have been Hans's brother-in-law and brother. It's very gratifying to know that where and when Hans touched and whom Hans has touched in the corners of his world, he left them a better place, and helped more folks and made so many friends. I am a better person for knowing Hans and sharing some of our lives together. And in closing, a prayer. Father of all, we pray to you for Hans and for all those whom we love but see no longer. Grant them eternal rest and let eternal light shine upon them. May Hans's soul and the souls of all the departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. And now, words from Claire, my wife, his sister.
Good morning. My name is Claire. I am Hans' sister. I woke this morning to a beautiful sunrise, and I thought what a beautiful day. Hans would have greeted this day with energy and purpose. I'd like to first thank everyone for all the calls, messages, cards, flowers from family and friends, in particular from our family in Wisconsin, Switzerland, and Australia. Even though they are far away, we feel their love and support here with us. Also, a heartfelt thank you to Beth for giving us such lovely words of comfort. After the picture slideshow we have, Beth will lead us in a final closing prayer. I can't possibly cover all the things I would like to say about Hans. This may take a few minutes just to get through. I can only give you a tiny glimpse of who he was and what he meant to me. He was my big brother. I loved him my whole life. I admired him and trusted him like no other person I have ever known. And I am heartbroken and lost, thinking about my life ahead and what this world will be like without him in it. In the play, Les Miserables, there is a lyric that says, "There is a grief that can't be spoken. There's a pain goes on and on." I always understood the words, but now I know, really know, exactly what they mean. We all felt the weight of it last Wednesday, and we feel it today, and we will again tomorrow, and for a long time yet to come. But one day soon, when our tears have dried, each of us will remember something special about Hans. His laugh, his contagious broad grin, his storytelling, his decency, and those will be happy memories that we can hold on to, and it will bring his joyful life right back to us. And that will be a good day. One thing that has helped me through this, and might help others as well, is to simply be reminded of Hans's unique perspective on life and on the universe. He knew there was a season and reason for every living thing, and that all life was precious and fragile and finite. So it brings me comfort that he knew one day he would become part of that philosophy. And because of that, Hans lived his life well. Hans lived today. As far back as I can remember, Hans was an organizer. When we were kids on Christmas Eve, he would map out our plan of attack for Christmas morning. He would say to Heidi and I, "Whoever wakes up first has to wake up the other two, and no one could go downstairs until all three of us were together." I thought we'd have my time together. But that was his sacred rule. And it was funny because Hans didn't live by a lot of rules, but this one I will always treasure. When I think about Hans as a young boy growing up, I remember that he was actually very shy. A lot of people wouldn't believe that now, but he truly was shy. He went to Colorado for the Outward Bound program, and a few years later to Alaska with the National Outdoor Leadership School. When he returned from these trips, he was visibly changed. The outdoor experiences and working with others in a shared community gave him self-confidence, and his natural leadership abilities and adventurous spirit was born. Hans was principled and ethical. He put people before process. He had strong convictions. One thing I will always remember, he refused to use the self-checkout line at the grocery store because he said, "I want to see and talk with a human being, and no technology is going to take that away from me." He was not a complainer, never fussed over things or over himself. Once he came to visit, I saw him limping and I said, "Hans, are you hurt? What happened?" "Oh yeah, I fell down the stairs 3 days ago. I'm fine." That was Hans, scraped knees, bruises. But he never complained about them, never fussed. He would come into my kitchen when I was cooking and lean over my shoulder and tease me and tell me not to overcook the pasta, which of course I did every time. He scolded me endlessly whenever I used paper plates, and rightfully so. One time I said, "Hans, I have to use paper plates today. We're picking crab outside." He just gave me that classic Hans smirk. We all know it. And said, "An excuse you use today is an excuse ready to use again tomorrow. We only have one planet." Hans was committed to making those choices every day that could make a difference in the world tomorrow. He kept a bucket in his shower to catch water for his plants. He engineered a water runoff system from his roof to capture rainwater for his vegetable garden and flowers. If he ever caught you putting anything in the garbage can, he would interrogate you on the spot. "What was that? Was that recyclable?" Or, "Don't throw that away, I could use that." He was well-read and knowledgeable, covering a long list of subjects: earth sciences, botany, wildlife, history, biographies. It didn't matter if you knew Hans for 20 years or just 20 minutes. He was a great conversationalist, so easy to talk to. There were 2 defining points in Hans's life that I believe led him to be truly happy. The first one was finding a home at Hood College. He was drawn to the atmosphere of academics and energized by the notion that he could make a difference in a student's future. He always said, a future that could very possibly change the world. And I know that inspired him every day. And the second one was when he met Sharon. Sharon filled his heart, and he loved her. You could hear it every time he began a sentence, "Sharon and I." You could see how happy he was whenever you saw them together. A tender moment, an arm around her shoulder, a kiss on the cheek. Hans was a Renaissance man, romantic and rare. He worked until the job was done. I often heard him say that all 3 of us were raised with a European work ethic. Hans embodied that. He was loyal, reliable, honest and fair. He was charming and devilish too. He gave the best hugs. He was kind and thoughtful. He took time to find the perfect gift. And when he saw how happy it made you feel, he just beamed in delight at his planning and success. He was so gentle with my mother during her long illness. He would bring her little photo albums full of pictures from his trips and show her the pictures and tell her the story behind them. And in her final days, when she didn't recognize us anymore, I watched him sit next to her, hold her hand, and talk to her softly and sweetly, and just repeat, "I love you, I love you." I believe in my heart she heard every word. And of course, Hans's unwavering devotion to our Father, countless weekend trips to North Carolina, bringing food and wine, and just wanting to spend time with my father and to be good company for him. My parents were our world. They raised us to be decent and good and kind, and Hans adored them. I would like to end with a short poem. It is written by Robert Frost. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. I've spent the last several days writing many versions of this, and in memory of Hans and his love for me, this is version number 28. And if you know, you know. Hans, I was truly blessed to have you as my brother. I will see you in every sunrise and every sunset, in the first bud of spring and the last frost of winter. When the moon changes the tide, I know you will float with it. I will miss you immeasurably.
seize upon the moment long ago. One breath away and there you will be, so young and carefree. Again you will see that place in time, so gold. Still away into that way back when you thought that all would last forever, but like the weather, nothing can ever and be in time stay gold. But can it be when we can see so vividly a memory? And yes, you say so must the day to fade away and leave a ray of sun so gold. Life is but a twinkling of an eye, yet filled with sorrow and compassion. Though not imagined, all things that happen will age too old, though gold.
Okay, this one's for Gabby. What a wonderful world. white and the brightness of day. I like the dark and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, singing, how do you do? They really say, I love you. I hear babies cry and I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than we'll know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like a lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. And the dreams that you dare to, why, oh, why can't I?
I was struck as I was listening to all of you how hard it is for all of us to refer to Hans in the past tense. His energy and his creativity and his vibrancy are not ones that we are ready to give up so easily. So I'm tasked with giving you an ending prayer, and really it's not mine. This comes from a book by an artist and a poet named Gwen Frostick, who was from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And she probably was in her 30s when Hans was about 1 and started creating these beautiful books of poetry and woodblock, where she was inspired by the nature of the forest and the streams and the lakes of the Upper Peninsula. But as I was thinking about Hans and the way that we all knew him at Hood College, which is so much of what you knew in his love of life, the words that she has written in a book called These Things Are Ours are ones that I'd like to share as we end. And so I invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer for whatever that means for you, mostly in a spirit of thanksgiving for Hans. So would you join me? On this earth, there is a oneness, a rhythmic flow of life through everything that lives. The things with roots and stems and leaves, the things with shells and fins and fur, the things with wings with which to fly, the things that crawl and those that walk, each thing must eat and breathe and rest. Each thing must seek, and each must be sought for. Each has a birth and a purpose to fulfill, to each an end and then a new beginning. The old log in the woods will never be a great tree again. Things never go back. Yet lying there covered with moss, it's creating new life, in which turn will be great and beautiful in its time. The fish eats the insect, the bird the fish, the mammal, the bird, and the insect and the mammal, as each in a universal rhythm is creating new life. For there is no life except life which comes from life. Waters flow where daisies grew, trees grow where swans once swam. All things on this earth are developing into new things. From what is here must come what will yet be. This is the fulfillment of the promise of life. Nothing can be destroyed. Everything is being created. Hans, we love you and miss you, and it is so hard for us to give up quickly all that you were. But we know that there is so much yet to come, and that the seeds of your life are planted through us for a future harvest. Wherever you are as you are listening, may you know the reflection of your life's kindness and beauty, and all the tears that fall for you, in all the stories that have been told, in the deep love shown here. We ask blessing for those who are hurting, healing for those hearts that are broken. And may Hans' inspiration lead us all to give the best of ourselves and keep his memory alive. We ask blessing and peace for all of us gathered here. Amen.